Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar in our series on ILC. My name is Meg Drexler, and along with our colleagues here at Community Business Bureau, we're delighted to welcome you to ILC Ready. This is our new program for community organisations who want to build their skills in planning projects and applying for funding. Thanks to the South Australian Department of Human Services through its NDIA Community Inclusion and Capacity Development Grant, the ILC Ready program is free. Joining us today, we have people from all kinds of organisations, big and small. We have experienced grant applicants and people who've never done a grant application before. This webinar, and indeed our whole ILC Ready program, is for all of you. If you are more experienced, some of the information we present today might be familiar, but do stick around because we'll be sharing some new stuff too. And you'll also have the chance to share your knowledge in our interactive Q&A. Before we get started, I'm going to share some tips to help you get the most out of today's webinar. First, sign up. If you're watching today but didn't register yourself, you can do that by clicking the link at the bottom of your screen or visiting cbb.com.au/ILC. If you know anyone else who'd like to join us, feel free to share that with them too. This is an interactive program, so the more people that get involved, the more we'll be able to learn together and from each other. Today is just the start of our ILC Ready program. There's still one more webinar and a full day live workshop touring South Australia next month. There's also the opportunity for organisations across South Australia to apply for individual support from our consultants to develop a proposal ready for future ILC grants. A bit more on that later. On your screen, you'll see some tools that will help you interact with me and the other people attending today. At any time, you can write a message in the chat window. That will be seen by everyone and will be viewable on a recording of this webinar that will be published on our website. If you don't see that chat window, you might need to click in the bottom right-hand corner to make it pop up. Kirsten Tate is moderating the chat today. Hi, Kirsten.
Hi.
So if you have any technical questions, you can write a message to Kirsten in the chat window. You can also post a question. There are two ways to do this. Click or tap on questions and you'll see all the questions that have been posted. We've already got two. You can vote for the questions you'd like answered or add your own. If there's something in the chat you want to add as a question, then hover your mouse over that comment, tap the message and click the question mark. If email is more accessible for you, you can also email ilc@cbb.com.au. Kirsten is watching that inbox and will see your response and share it with the group. We'll answer as many questions as we can in about 40 minutes from now when we start our live Q&A. Joining me today is Katrina Rainsford from Inclusive Sport. Before you leave the webinar today, please share your feedback by clicking on polls at the bottom of the screen. So I hope you enjoy today's webinar. Remember to get the most out of today, ask questions anytime and vote for your favourites. Today, you'll learn about how to take an ILC project from the seed of an idea to a project that delivers outcomes. We'll look at what the NDIA is looking for in an ILC grant project, including the investment principles that guide the 4 new ILC grant programs. We'll hear about how SA organisations, big and small, have turned their ILC projects into their ILC ideas into grant fundable projects by using their strengths and the power of collaboration. We'll also look at how the NDIA assesses grant applications and what they're looking for. In our last webinar, we looked at the big picture of the ILC and all the detail about the 4 new ILC grant programs. If you missed it, you can catch up. Visit our website and click webinars to get a recording or a transcript. First, a little refresher. 4.3 million Australians live with conditions that, if unsupported, cause disability. That's about 1 in 5 of us. So disability is actually very common. Everyone has a part in making Australia a place where everyone has a fair go, regardless of their ability. And for that reason, ILC projects funding is open to organisations and businesses of all kinds who want to make Australian society a fairer place. ILC stands for Information, Linkages and Capacity Building. It's an important part of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, or NDIS. Many people with disability will get the support they need from the mainstream systems we all use, like healthcare and education, and also from informal supports like friends, family, and community groups. Some people need more specialised support. They're the 460,000 Australians who will have an NDIS plan. People can use the funds they're given by the government in their NDIS plan to buy the supports they need to live well from anyone that they choose. The NDIS has partners in the community. In South Australia, the partners in the community are Kudos, Bapt Care, Mission Australia and Feros Care. These organisations are the first point of contact for any of the 4.3 million Australians with disability looking for help. The NDIA also provides ILC grants to organisations and businesses to do ILC projects in their communities. That's what we're talking about in this webinar series. So the ILC Grant Program is there to invest in making our communities, public services and workplaces more inclusive so that people of all abilities can play an active role as citizens. Just what does that mean, inclusion? And what on earth has this very strange image that you see now have to do with that? Both questions are answered really well in a short video that you can watch later at www.notspecialneeds.com. In the video, we see people with Down syndrome talk about the concept of special needs. In the video, it says that it would be special if people with Down syndrome needed to be massaged by a cat, or eat dinosaur eggs for breakfast, wear a giant suit of armour, or be woken each morning by a celebrity. But they don't. People with Down syndrome, like everyone else, have basic human needs. As it says on the Not Special Needs website, those needs are things like to eat, drink, breathe and sleep, to be nurtured, loved, educated and sheltered, to move, communicate, contribute and work, and to share, love and live. Sure, people with Down syndrome might need extra assistance, sometimes even significant assistance and adjustments to meet a particular need, but that doesn't make that common human need special. So no matter what differences we may have, everyone wants the same basic things out of life. And inclusion means making a society where that's equally possible for everyone. And that's what the ILC is for. I'm just going to make this slide a little bit bigger so that it's easier for you to read, if the computer will behave itself. Here we go. That's better. So the document that you're seeing on screen now comes from the NDIA's ILC Grant Strategy towards 2022. If it is a little hard to read on screen, you can look more closely at that document at the link that we'll post. So the ILC Grant Strategy has 4 programs. There's the Individual Capacity Building Program, the National Information Program, the Mainstream Capacity Building Program, and the Economic and Community Participation Program. We had a close look at those in our last webinar. Now we're going to look at each of the 5 investment principles that sit behind these programs. In each of the ILC grant programs, the NDIA is looking to give grants to projects that are evidence-based wherever possible, meaning that they answer a real need using a solution that's likely to work, that are led by people with disability and their families, that are replicable and scalable to national impact, meaning that they're looking for ideas with legs that could be used in different places all over Australia or made bigger over time. They're looking for activities that support a sustainable NDIS, meaning that projects help prevent people from needing the specialised support from an NDIS plan. That might be making mainstream services more inclusive or preventing conditions from getting worse. Finally, they're looking for activities that support important groups like Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, people from different cultural backgrounds, people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex or questioning, or people in regional and remote areas. Let's look a bit closer at each of these. When you are given an ILC grant, you're trusted with public money, money that belongs to all of us. So the NDIA, as a government body, is looking for projects that are most likely to solve a real problem. They will also want to know who will be helped, where and how many people, and that there's some evidence that the things your project will do are likely to make a difference. The City of Playford is a local council in the north of Adelaide. In this area, there are many people with disability and many people from different cultural backgrounds. All of them come to the council for help with different things. They have social groups for people with disability. They also have free internet access at the Civic Centre so that people without access at home can come in to connect with government and other services online. They noticed that people with disability from different cultural backgrounds were having trouble getting help from organisations. That's the first step in evidence, noticing a problem. Once they noticed a problem, the City of Playford started to dig deeper to research the causes of the problem. Now, when you think about research, I wonder what comes to mind. Perhaps statistics and surveys? This type of quantitative research is great at measuring and defining things: who, how big, how many, and how much, but not so great at finding out what or why or how. For that, you need qualitative research. This is the type of evidence gathering that helps you get some clues about what's really going on, why, and how you might go about making things better. Qualitative research can be done formally, for example, with focus groups and professional researchers, like the study that we saw Anglicare did with Flinders University in Webinar 1. But it can also be done simply through careful and objective observation. That's what City of Playford did. They walked with people through every point in the process of trying to access services and noted what they saw. Helping a number of people in this way, they noticed patterns in the types of problems people were facing. Some of the pain points included cultural barriers. For example, in some cultures, it's usual for a woman to have her husband present if meeting with another man. Male staff might literally find the door closed. There were language barriers. Interpreters sometimes could be difficult to access, but even with an interpreter, much of the language around disability includes concepts that don't really easily translate to other languages or other cultures. There were also system barriers. With so many different services, it can take some persistence and knowledge of our systems to get to the right place. After being redirected, people already facing some of those cultural and language barriers were losing hope. The City of Playford then tested their assumptions by reaching out to the other councils in the north and the local office of the Department of Human Services to find out if they'd noticed the same things, and they had. Together, what they realised was that all of these pain points had something in common. They were happening at the front line across many different service systems. To make a change, the City of Playford, the City of Salisbury, and the Department of Human Services decided to work together by applying for an ILC grant to create a CALD toolkit, culturally and linguistically diverse toolkit, for frontline staff working across different social services. Their aim was to empower that first person in the front line to work around cultural, language and system barriers so the person seeking help would get the support they needed the first time. Having understood the problem to be solved, they needed to show the benefit to the community in solving it. For that, you need to be able to show the size and scope of the problem. First, they looked for research for evidence of the problems from other sources. They found the research that Anglicare and Flinders University conducted. They also looked to the relevant peak body, FECA, the Federation of Ethnic Communities Council of Australia, for existing research. Both universities and peak bodies are really good places to start looking for research to evidence the scope of need. And we'll be pasting some links to those sites that we've mentioned now too. To size the need, there are online tools that will summarise demographic data for you from reputable sources like the Australian Bureau of Statistics. These tools can even make charts and graphs you can copy, which is great help if you're not a data whiz. Some of our favourites that Kirsten's posting links to now are the Social Health Atlas, which tracks health and social factors nationally and by area. Profile ID, which gives demographic information for specific locations. And the NDIS demand map, which gives you information about the predicted demand for NDIS services. But sometimes it can be difficult to get accurate data when you're looking at a very small population. There just wasn't the data there for specific cultural groups within the Playford area. So the City of Playford and their partners also looked to their own systems for data about the frequency of the problem. In combination, they had a good case for funding. We did speak to Cindy Nuzzling from the City of Playford in a previous edition of the webinar you're watching today. So if you wanted to catch up a little more about that story, there's a link on our website that you can watch. Now, the final piece of the evidence puzzle. How will what you're proposing to do make a difference to the problem? You could use evidence that similar approaches have worked before. We saw that example with HCO and their Neighbourhood Links program in webinar 1. That had already a good evidence base that it worked and was based on a model that was successful in the UK. Or your evidence might come from your organisation's mission and the consultation you've already done as part of your usual business. A good example of this approach is Inclusive Sport. Inclusive Sport SA exists to create an inclusive culture through sport and recreation. Their ILC vision is a future when someone living with disability sees a sport on TV that they want to play, they can access that sport on the same basis as everyone else. To achieve that vision, sport and recreation clubs need to know and have confidence in what to do to include everyone, and people with disability need encouragement to get involved in mainstream sport for all the benefits we know that provides. So, Inclusive Sport designed a project to deliver against two of the ILC's outcomes as well as their mission. Those two ILC outcomes were that people with disability use and benefit from the same community activities as everyone else, and that they have the knowledge, skills, and confidence to participate. If you stick around today, in about 30 minutes from now, we'll actually have Katrina Rainsford from Inclusive Sport on the line. So if any questions come up as we're going through this case study, feel free to post them. Now, Inclusive Sport already had plenty of evidence of the benefits that being part of sport and recreation provides for everyone. Through their work, they also had a good understanding of the barriers against inclusion for people of all abilities in mainstream sport and recreation. One of the main challenges happens again at the front line. When people in community sporting clubs are unsure about how to include people with different abilities and concerned about doing it right, the result can be that nothing is done to include the person with disability and they end up leaving the club. This knowledge helped Inclusive Sport design 3 activities to deliver against those outcomes for the community, for the sport and recreation sector, and for people living with disability. First, for the community, a campaign to make the participation of people with disability in sport seen as ordinary life. Last month, a survey was distributed to 10 mainstream sports targeting general club members, parents and participants to gauge a benchmark of the current attitudes in sport, with the return of some interesting results. That report will be available on the Inclusive Sport SA website in the coming weeks. Later this month, Inclusive Sport will release the Well Played campaign with the message, "Play together, play well." Its aim is to change the hearts and minds of the whole community using social media to help people see the benefits of including everyone in sport through stories like Isaiah's. You can see a picture of Isaiah's story on screen, and we're sharing a link to where you can watch that video now. Watch Inclusive Sport SA's Facebook page, Humans of Sport in SA, for more. For the sport and recreation sector, Inclusive Sport SA met with key state sport administrators about inclusion of people with disability in club sport. By doing that, they found opportunities to share knowledge, provide training to the sector, and bring together the many great resources that were already available about how to improve inclusion in sport. They are now building an online hub where major sporting bodies, community clubs, service providers, participants and their families can connect with each other and share supports, events, competitions and strategies that work. Finally, for people living with disability, the third activity, there's a self-driven participant advisory group of 6 local and high-performance athletes and coaches with lived experience of disability, as well as some resources being created by people with disability for people with disability. The advisory group's aim is to help the sector implement initiatives that take the views of people with disability into account. Inclusive Sport SA are working with people with disability to make short videos as well on topics like how to deal with an umpire's decision, how to meet people at your club, and what to expect as a player. With outcomes and activities defined, a good ILC project also includes a way to measure how well each activity meets the outcomes. As online activities, Inclusive Sport's social media campaign and sector forum will have a lot of measures built in. So how many will be easy to measure, but how well is more difficult? So Inclusive Sport are also using surveys at the start and end of their activities to measure how well they've delivered those outcomes, that people with disability have the knowledge, skills and confidence to participate, and mainstream sport is better able to include people of all abilities. So qualitative and quantitative measures are the cornerstone of a good project evaluation. Above all, evaluation is a learning process, and Inclusive Sport have designed activities that let them easily measure how many people engage with each activity, but also understand what's working and what isn't from feedback they get online and in their work directly with people with disability and with the sector. So, we've now finished looking at the first of the ILC investment principles, evidence-based activities with defined outcomes, and how different ILC projects are meeting this by using evidence to find a problem, find a solution, size the problem, define outcomes and design activities to meet them, and measure the results of their projects. In the end, what the NDIA will look for is some evidence that your project knows what it sets out to achieve in line with those ILC objectives. has shown how the activities you'll do will achieve an outcome, and that you have a plan to measure the results of your activities. The next investment principle the ILC is using is to invest in activities led by and for people with disability. Now, all projects should include the voice of people with disability to make sure that the activities you're doing meet real needs. We've already heard about how inclusive sport is doing this, when they're gathering evidence, when they're developing solutions, and when they're measuring how well things are working. In some ILC grant programs, like the Individual Capacity Building Program, the NDIA will be looking for applications specifically from organisations led by and for people with disability or priority groups. Some groups led by people with disability or those priority groups may be very small, unincorporated organisations. Because they are not legal entities themselves and may not have a registered office, unincorporated groups can only apply for an ILC grant by working with an auspicer. An auspicer is a separate organisation who manages the grant money, while the unincorporated group delivers the project. We'll hear a bit more about auspicing in our next webinar. The next investment principle, investing in activities that are replicable and scalable to national impact. In some programs, the NDIA might be looking to fund ideas that can grow and spread nationally to make the most of the investment. It's our public money after all. That might be less important for grant programs that are targeted at specific groups, but it's particularly likely to be looked for in the National Information Program and the Mainstream Capacity Building Program. Both of these programs are looking to improve things in big systems. The National Information Program aims to create a nationally consistent base of information about disability. The Mainstream Capacity Building Program is looking to make change across the systems we all use. They're nationwide and similar everywhere. Inclusive Sports Program that we just looked at is replicable and scalable to other states because the sports sector is similar everywhere. Another example, Autism SA's website, autismfriendlycharter.org, is a project that started in SA and is now available nationally. The fourth investment principle is to invest in activities that support a sustainable NDIS. As we've said before, the NDIS is more than just NDIS plans. It's a whole system or scheme that works together to make a more inclusive society. So your ILC project should complement, but not duplicate, the supports that are already available from NDIS plans, mainstream systems, and the work of partners in the community. Partners in the community include ECEIs, which stands for Early Childhood Early Intervention Providers, and LACs, the Local Area Coordinators. In a previous edition of this webinar, we spoke with Lee Spaven from BaptCare. So there's more information as well around the case study I'm going to present now, available at our website. The idea behind local area coordination is for each area to have a coordinator who helps people create the life they choose through their own network of support from friends, family, community, and support services of all kinds. The idea started here in Western Australia in 1988, and it's also now in use in the UK. You can learn more about the theory behind local area coordination, including this report, at the links we're posting now. We spoke with one local area coordinator, Lee Spaven, about their role in the ILC at BaptCare. BaptCare are contracted by the NDIA to provide local area coordination. And in Lee's words, local area coordination is about what is a good life as determined by the person with disability. So as well as linking people with formal support, LACs also help people find other opportunities to make their version of a good life possible in their community. That includes working directly with people who've met the NDIS access requirements to understand, navigate and access an NDIS plan, but also building the capacity of people living with disability to access government services and supports, and working with communities to promote social inclusion and opportunities, for example, through workshops and information sessions about the NDIS. Lee sees the ILC as an opportunity to grow a network of support throughout the community and all our service systems. The information, linkages and capacity building activities delivered by LACs and through ILC grant funded projects will complement the support people with NDIS plans receive. But ILC is also very important for those Australians who don't need or get support from NDIS plans, but who will benefit greatly from mainstream and community services that include people of all abilities. For example, a person might not be eligible for an NDIS plan if they are not a permanent resident. An LAC could link them with support available through health, education, multicultural services and community supports. Some people with permanent and significant mental health issues may get an NDIS plan, but an LAC could also link anyone with mental health issues to community mental health and peer support. When planning your ILC project, it's a good idea to find out what your LAC is doing. That might help you understand where there are unmet needs, but also making sure your LAC knows about your project can help when they're linking people with support. If you think your LAC could play a role in your project, make sure you reach out to them early in the planning process. Don't assume what they can or cannot do. BAPTCare are the LAC for the East and West metropolitan area, as well as the York and Mid-North region. And you can find out who your local LAC is at the link Kirsten's posting now. The final investment principle, to fund activities that support important groups. Now, this might be a focus or optional, depending on the requirements of each grant opportunity. Those important groups are CALD, C-A-L-D, which stands for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse People, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, LGBTIQ+, or lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, questioning and other, and regional and remote communities. We've already shared in our last webinar some projects supporting people from diverse backgrounds. There are also projects supporting South Australia's regional and remote communities and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. There was a remote round last year that provided funding to selected organisations working with those groups, including a number of Aboriginal controlled organisations. You can find a link to the full list of remote grant winners on our website. When you're helping an important group in a local area, it's a good idea to think about who is affected by the problem, who plays a role in the problem, and who can help in the solution. These are your project's stakeholders. We've already seen how inclusive sport is working with stakeholders from right across their sector, as well as people with disability in their ILC project. Some ILC projects are being done by consortia. A consortium is a group of organisations working together to deliver different parts of one ILC project. There will be a project lead organisation and then others who are helping. Some ILC projects helping important groups will also have a lot in common with other separate projects. So it's a good idea to look into what else is happening in your area for two reasons. First, you'll know if your project is needed or if a solution is already being put in place. Second, you might find opportunities to share resources and knowledge that will make your project better. Here's an example. Although they speak many different languages, culturally and linguistically diverse communities face some common barriers to participation. So some projects have joined up with others also looking to support culturally and linguistically diverse communities to form the Northern Adelaide ILC Collective, a group of 8 ILC-funded projects together with representatives from local, state and federal government, the NDIA. Now, disability is one part of a complex mix of social problems faced by people from culturally diverse communities in the Northern Adelaide region. The members of the collaborative group have come together in a semi-structured partnership because they realise that solving these complex problems needs a joined-up effort. Having been awarded ILC funding for various projects targeting people from different cultural backgrounds, they came together to work out how they could make a collective impact. They created a shared vision that services in Adelaide's outer north are more inclusive of people from different cultural backgrounds with disability and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with disabilities. They've set up regular meetings and project groups that work on each of 4 common aims or outcomes. They also offer each other in-kind support around activities that work towards their vision, including each member's individual ILC project. So being part of the Northern Adelaide ILC Collective creates shared value in 3 ways. Members of the collective learn from each other's experience. They share resources, avoiding duplication of effort. And of course, the community benefits because a joined up approach can do more to make services culturally inclusive. So collaboration has many benefits. The starting point is knowing who your stakeholders are. Collaboration can be as simple as reaching out to your local LAC and your community to understand the problem you want to solve with your project and find a solution that will work. Or it can open the door to working together on a bigger goal of which your ILC project is just a part, like the Northern Adelaide ILC Collective. Whatever approach you take, working with others can help you learn, raise awareness of your project, avoid duplication, maximise your resources, and open the door to other opportunities. So that's the investment principles. Now we're going to have a look at how your ILC grant is assessed. When you put in an ILC grant application, it's seen by a few different people. The starting point is the Department of Social Services Community Grants Hub. That's where you'll submit an ILC application. They get your application, check that you're eligible, and assess your application against the selection criteria. Applications that meet those criteria get passed on to the Selection Advisory Panel. They make recommendations to the delegate about which applicants should be awarded funding, how much, and with what conditions. The delegate is the person within the NDIA that makes the final decision. We'll look at this process, including a couple more steps, in our next webinar. For now, we'll focus on the assessor, the person who'll be looking to see if your project meets the selection criteria. Before we go on, just a note of caution. This is a general summary only and not official advice from the NDIA. If you are going to apply for a grant, just make sure to read the requirements in the official documents that come out with each grant round. You'll find them, as well as official feedback on previous grant rounds, by searching ILC on the Community Grants Hub. Kirsten will be posting a link to the Community Grants Hub in just a moment. If you're watching us live, please stay with us and you'll be able to come back and look at those on the recording. So the selection criteria are the key things the NDIA want to see in ILC grant projects. They're different with each grant round. With every ILC grant round, the assessors reflect on all the applications they got and publish feedback about what made a successful application. If you weren't successful, you can read that feedback and maybe try again in a future grant round. We've read all the feedback from previous grant rounds, and at CBB, we've picked out the key themes that we noticed. We've already seen many of these reflected in the case studies that we shared today. They are Eligible activities. The NDIA is looking for information on what you're going to do, where, how much, how many, and how long your activities will last. They're looking for evidence of your capability to evaluate, resource, and manage your project sustainably. Involvement of people with disability throughout the design, development, delivery, and evaluation of your project is very important, as is engagement with stakeholders and having a plan to manage this. At the end of the day, what the NDIA really wants from the ILC is outcomes that will make it possible for people, regardless of ability, to participate fully in their community as active citizens. If you haven't already, you might like to watch the first webinar in our series for more about ILC outcomes. And to learn more about how you can create a great ILC project, book in for our regional workshops on our website and tune into our next webinar. We're nearly at the end of today's session. Still to come, our live Q&A with Katrina Rainsford from Inclusive Sport. Now it's your turn to talk. Using the chat window, can you share with the group these 3 things? Or just keep them for your own reflection if you like. What was one thing you liked best about today's webinar? What was one thing you learned? And what is one thing that you'll do as a result of what you've learned today? If the chat window isn't accessible for you, you can also email ilc@cbb.com.au. To help you, here's what we covered today. We looked at the ILC investment principles. They were looking for activities that are evidence-based for a defined impact, that are led by and for people with disability, that are ideas with legs that could be replicated or scaled to a national impact, that support a sustainable NDIS, that support important groups. We also looked a bit at collaboration and what assessors want, remembering that what they really want is outcomes. So in a moment, we'll start our live Q&A with Katrina Rainsford, General Manager, Sector Engagement at Inclusive Sport SA. If you don't have a question yet, stick around and you'll have the chance to listen in or join the discussion using the chat window. You can get ready now by clicking on questions at the bottom of your screen to see and upvote other people's questions or post your own. Before we go on today, please take a moment to share your feedback by clicking on polls at the bottom of the screen. If you can do that before you go, that'd be great. That is one way that we at CBB are measuring how well ILC Ready is meeting its outcome to get South Australian organisations ILC Grant Ready. While you're posting your final questions and voting for your favourites, let's look at what's coming up next in the ILC Ready program. A few seconds after today's webinar ends, you'll be able to watch a replay right here in this crowdcast. We'll also be doing some other webinars coming up, and you can find replays of our last webinar, The Big Picture, on our website. We'll also be making a transcript available on our website soon. We've already run today's webinar twice with a different interview and Q&A guest each time. So if you wanted to catch up on the interviews with those guests, you can do that on the website. There's still more to come in our ILC Ready program as well. During August, we're visiting 6 locations across South Australia with a free workshop to help you learn how to design and plan a project ready for ILC funding. Now, if you're not sure yet whether ILC is a fit for your organisation, that's okay. The knowledge and skills that you'll take away can also help in other areas of your work. You'll learn about how to design any project to deliver social impact, how to plan and deliver any grant-funded project, and respond to a grant application with confidence. ILC Ready is funded by South Australia's Department of Human Services through its NDIA Community Inclusion and Capacity Development Grant, which means that the webinar series and workshop is free for anyone to access. Applications are open from now until early September, for a chance to be one of 20 organisations who'll be granted a fully funded package of one-to-one consulting support to develop their project idea. So please get involved and share our website cbb.com.au/ILC with anyone you think would be interested. So thank you everyone for your questions and for your votes. We are now joined by Katrina Rainsford from Inclusive Sport SA. Hello, Katrina. How are you?
Hi, Meg. How are you going?
Very, very well, thank you. We've got a couple of questions here, Katrina, which I'll answer in a moment. But before we do that, perhaps let's just start to talking a little bit more about your project. We've already heard about the 3 fantastic things that Inclusive Sport SA is doing. I'm wondering what excites you most about those activities and just generally the opportunities presented by the ILC Grants program.
Yeah, look, it's a really an exciting project and program to be a part of. I suppose for me, it's about collaborating across the sector, so I get to chat to a whole lot of sports to work out what's working, what's not working, and actually providing a voice for people with disability with our participant advisory group. It's the first one in the state, so it's really, really exciting to actually, have this committee who are offering their opinions and, their shared experiences of what they've come across in sport, and then able to then take that back to the sector and say, hey, look, this works, this doesn't work, and also providing those tools for people with disability. Also in the grants, the fact that, there's time and, money being invested in building, frameworks and capability in the sector, whether, you're looking at sport, you're looking at any other, part of community life, the fact that we're investing time and money and frameworks to make, people with disability, their lives, ordinary. I think that's just, fantastic that we get to be a part of that.
It does sound like there's a lot of learning that's possible out of ILC. And you've touched on that with your participant advisory group and the connections that you're making in the sector that could obviously have opportunities to be sustainable well beyond your initial project. Are there any particular learnings that you've had that have been really exciting or that you think will have a big impact?
Well, I've been working in sport for a long time, and prior to that, I've been involved in sport my whole life. And what's really, really exciting to see is, state sports are always fighting to, build up the participation levels, and they've got to get more members to get more funding and all that sort of thing. And by including everybody, you essentially get to do this. So for me, it's a no-brainer. But, a lot of the times we are, you do get faced by different challenges. Every sport has to think about their state competitions, their high-performance pathways and that sort of thing. But, again, coming from a state sport, a lot of the times sport hold, what works for them really close to their chest. But working in the inclusion space, people are actually happy to share, what works. And that's really, really exciting to see. And really, it's a breath of fresh air. I thought coming into this role it was going to be like, getting blood from a stone, from different sports to share what works for them to, help another sport. But it's really enlightening to see that that sports are willing to share what works. So that's probably the biggest learning sort of for me at the moment.
Yeah, and that you've obviously had a lot of openness with that collaboration that's got the potential to have some huge benefits.
Yeah, it does, and people want to do things better. And you mentioned the survey that we released. That report will go out this week. And there was 95% of all people surveyed said, they believe in inclusion at its core and that sort of thing. What was interesting was, there was about 40% said they were sure or they weren't sure that it would actually affect their competition. So they're saying, we want to do inclusion, but not if it joins my team. Yeah, that was really interesting. So that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we're going to face is that, that people with disability participating in sport have great visibility at a high performance level, like Dylan Alcott, Kurt that sort of thing. But the grassroots level, it's okay, no, that needs to be separate competition and that needs to be confined to a different time and not joining mainstream clubs. So that's, I think, is going to be our biggest challenge is, changing the mums and dads of the, John and Joey Smiths.
Yeah, and that's part of what you're doing with that video campaign. I guess where would you, in a future where those attitudes had be changed, I guess, what do you think would be different? How would sport and recreation look differently to those of us that participate or watch?
I think if so we're developing training for the sport and rec sector and local communities is just about having that people first emphasis and asking those questions and having the confidence to answer those questions and then problem solve. Because everything, if a person is willing to participate in a sport or recreation, that's the hardest thing to actually achieve, is to have them, the interest for them to actually want to do something. So if they have that interest that they actually want to participate, then it's okay, well, there's a different challenge or impairments or barriers, and that's just another conversation of saying, well, what support do we need to provide?
So it becomes part of the normal conversation rather than something that's seen as extraordinary.
Yeah, exactly right. So I think providing those tools and problem solving, and that's the thing, you can't just go in and say, okay, this is what disability looks like, because everybody knows disability looks like different on every person, because it is. But what I think we're trying to achieve is teaching or providing tools for the sport and rec sector to say, hey, look, these are some example questions or questionnaires that you can ask a caregiver or the person in question to actually help you go, okay, well, this person wants to play, or this person doesn't have to play. It could be a volunteer, somebody who wants to turn up every week and score, somebody who wants to, help mark the fields on a soccer pitch or put the goals out, So being active in sport isn't about just pulling on a Guernsey. It's being involved in that club culture. And that's what I think a lot of sports aren't really, getting the message, in that, when you build up a club member, the club member, they get that loyalty. And a lot of the time when you do have that person with disability joining your club, you get the whole family. So you potentially could be having somebody in the canteens. We've got, there's an athletics family that we're looking to film. And there's a family of 5, and everybody has a role in that sports club. So, so just keep a lookout for the videos that we're looking to produce. There are going to be some amazing stories. I'm really excited about it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Katrina, for sharing your story with us today and for the chat. Is there anything that you finally would like to add before I get on to the questions that have been posted?
No. I would encourage everybody to, put in an application, because, what you're trying to achieve, somebody, hasn't thought of, and anything that we can do to build capability in the sector and include people with disability in ordinary life is better.
Thank you so much, Katrina, for joining us.
No worries.
I'm going to answer a couple of questions now from Michael that just generically regarding ILC grants. So the first question is, can we provide lists of recipients of ILC grant rounds for the disabled people's organisations and family organisations? Yes, we can, Michael. I believe we've posted a link to those on our website. And if we haven't already got one, when we finish today, Kirsten will post a link in the chat window too, but they will be on our website for you, and we'll email them too. The second one, will future ILC grant rounds include, firstly, the development of, here we go. Sorry, just a little computer glitch. The development of disability-led organisations, and B, also the development of peer networks supported by disability-led organisations. Michael, that was the focus of the interim disabled people and family organisations grant round that came out in December. In webinar 1, we spoke with the NDIA, and I believe that question was answered there. And I think the answer is that, yes, there's still the requirements of future grant rounds haven't come out, but it's highly likely that there will continue to be an emphasis on building up disability-led organisations and also peer networks, because the view is that the best people to provide peer support are other people with disability, and that they should be having a very active role in delivering and designing those supports. So I hope that's answered your questions. I will go back to webinar 1 and double check what the NDIA said, and I'll post the official answer to that question as well by email and in the chat window. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'd like to say thank you to our case studies, Inclusive Sport SA, and thank you, Katrina, for coming on today and chatting with us. The City of Playford, in consortium with the City of Salisbury and the Department of Human Services, the BaptCare Local Area Coordination, and the Northern Adelaide ILC Collaborative Group. Thank you to all of you for sharing your projects and experience with me to share with all of you today. I do hope you've all been inspired. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you at the next webinar in this series. Goodbye.